work opportunities. This council, indeed, are being led by the Deputy President and former Deputy President and now President of the country, has made many, many strides in the strategy at the HRDC. Some of the areas we are happy that they will be looking at is to see how we can build a flexible and responsive skill system, but also how a program can, the expansion of programs to address occupations in demand, including skills in new economies, as well as raising skills level of employed workers, and also implementing worker and shop steward education with a focus on workplace skills plan to address workplace training, as well as, very importantly, establishing effective structures and systems for achieving quality. We need in South Africa a skills for productive citizen for all in the country, so that it can address the structural problems of the labor market, that which we have inherited in the past, and so that we can transform the South African labor market from one with a low skills base to one characterized by rising skills and a commitment to lifelong learning. And for some of the new things that needs to be done to achieve many of this is indeed we've got to address sectoral approaches to skills development, and this can form an important element of a combined aim of creating economic wealth as well as having social objective that can both seek to engage employers in skills development, and whilst doing that can develop better linkages between employer demand for skills and education and training supply. Therefore, honourable members, honourable Chair, where there is a demand for skills within the industry, the SETAs, Sector Education Training Authorities, must formalize supply thereof by way of, but they also should not be limited to learning programs funded through learnerships, including in that is apprenticeships, bursaries, internships, and skills programs. Such learning programs not only deliver skills and expertise, but also afford learnership the opportunity to become active, to play an active role within the realm of the South African economy. Gone are the days, honourable members, where the SETAs must be seen as a cash cow for looting, and where the SETAs must be seen to be introducing very strange projects that does not lend itself to the overall objective of economic and human resource development. Tebogo tells us that in her internship at Indwe, Risk, it was both exciting, she said, and both challenging to be exposed to different departments and industry. And in her 12th month, she was able to obtain a regulatory examination qualification, but this also made sure that she can have credits towards a short-term insurance qualification. This we certainly support. At the same time, at our colleges, we must rise to the occasion to ensure that competition can be acquired either through structured training in public or private Tvet schools and centres, or through practical experience on the job in enterprises. This is a dual program that we certainly would support, and we are happy at the level of the HRDC. At last, the strategy have now started to give attention to systematically addressing key challenges associated with dysfunctional colleges, especially in the quality of learning and teaching, as well as the financial management, and to bring in new network models and guidelines to support college relationship with local industry. Some of this has been demonstrated at various partnerships, some being at SASO, some being at some of the other colleges. And this new way is required also at universities to form a very strong bond between each other. Some of the challenge we have is to ensure that we deal with the weakness in research and innovation, but also to make sure that we have a capable state. An important effort has been made in Phalaborwa mining through the Premier and also in the province as a whole. Similar examples we have seen at the level of Free State, and it's no wonder they are #1 in the country, because they have been able to implement a range of different, very important skills development programs that include sending many of our young people to very many different parts of the country. And these, of course, are extremely important to open up opportunities for many of our young people. Honourable members, responsiveness is a behavioural change when incited by a stimulus. It is a characteristic of biological organisms. Adaptation to changes in environmental conditions, and those are in learning, in an ecological prerequisite of survival. Responsiveness is to drive to survive. As applied to universities, responsiveness means meeting society's broad expectations that higher education will adapt to change and contribute to national needs. We are forced, honourable members, to introduce new ways as knowledge and technology are changing so fast that specific skills for specific needs increasingly have to be generated on the job. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I've been looking around and looking at duty whips for today from all parties. And I looked at them with a particular eye so that they assist me with their members. Even if it means it's your chief whips that are disturbing, duty whips have a responsibility to make sure that there's some order in the House. I won't mention who the duty whips are. I know them and I've looked at them so that there's some order. Over to you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chair. This morning's Business Day has 2 articles in it on the 4th Industrial Revolution. They talk of smart cities, logistics, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and robotics. The ANC is going to love this. We will hear the phrase 4th Industrial Revolution frequently over the next year or so, you can be sure. And yet we live in a country that is struggling to develop. We have high unemployment and low skills level. Our education system is floundering. Our manufacturing has declined. Our economy is stuck somewhere in the mid-20th century. The 21st century 4th Industrial Revolution is a fantasy. Our country can't produce the skilled people to drive the 2nd and 3rd Industrial Revolutions, let alone the 4th. What should we do with our 15 billion rand a year that we have to spend on skills education? Here's what the DA would do. Our approach will be driven by the idea of global excellence. We will get advice from the best people in the world on the skills of the 21st century and how to develop them. We will set up a modern apprenticeship system and a range of internationally accredited ICT and allied training programs. We will establish much firmer links between schooling, colleges and universities of technology, so a proper pipeline is created. We will make sure the skills we develop encompass all the most important and up-to-date industrial and commercial needs of a modern economy. The information economy will be taken seriously and skills will be provided for it. We will make sure local and international top companies help us devise our skills strategy. We will include the best people in the country, irrespective of their race. We will get rid of mediocre institutions such as poor-performing SETAs and failing Tvets. We will insist on excellence. We will be ruthless with poor curricula and outdated training. We will make sure that all skills training is done on a 2-track system, practical training on the one hand and theoretical training on the other, as in the best training systems in the world. We will make sure every workplace, and there are 1 million workplaces in South Africa, every workplace has 1 or more apprentices. We will incentivize workplaces to incorporate apprentices for their practical training. We will make sure every apprentice receives theory training at up-to-date colleges and training schools. We will assess where we are short of people to do the training, and we will bring in international trainers and lecturers on special visas where necessary. Over time, we will develop a system which produces award-winning, well-trained people able to work in basic manufacturing and other sectors, as well as the most advanced manufacturing and information industries. Our economy will be able to move into the fourth industrial revolution as a result. Unemployment will be reduced, and 21st century economic growth will be stimulated. Instead, we are stuck with the ANC's approach. I call this the nationalized honeypot approach. With their 15 billion, they have pursued a xenophobic, parochial, outdated, and mediocre system based on redistributive principles. The funds, cheers, Mr. Ndlozi. The funds are distributed extremely thinly over a vast range of institutions and organizations. This is designed to give all and sundry a tiny piece of the pie and to keep the cadres happy. The ANC doesn't really like excellence. It suffers from a very bad case of the tall poppy syndrome. So where excellence exists, it is not as fully supported as it should be. They pretend to take advice from those who know best through a body which has been chaired for the past several years by none other than Cyril Ramaphosa himself. But this body is embroiled in a web of plans, strategies, turnaround strategies, summits, conferences, and consultations. Typical of the Ramaphosa approach, it leads nowhere. The ANC think nothing of consigning to oblivion anyone who is not Black, African, and preferably ANC aligned, however highly skilled they may be. Thus, we have lost the skills of thousands of willing participants in making the system work. They treat the private sector with disdain and dislike, alienating them from participating actively in skills education, although the private sector itself provides the money through the skills levy. They have ruined some of our best Tvet colleges, emptying them of older, experienced staff and filling them with cadres. The Tshwane South College is a case in point. From being one of the most outstanding colleges in the country, it is now protest-ridden and possibly corrupt. They have presided over the mediocrity of the rest of the colleges and persistently failed to act to revamp and modernize their outdated curricula. Through the CETAs, they have operated a largely corrupt patronage system which has given thousands of tiny grants to micro-training institutions that are not properly accredited. This simply reproduces unemployment. The ANC's inherent xenophobia and parochialism means that it refuses to seek trainers from outside the country. They believe arrogantly that we can do it all ourselves. We can't. Sadly, this is now the system we are saddled with. It is wasteful, it is of poor quality, and it is outdated. The 15 billion we have for skills, more than is given annually to 17 universities combined, is spread so thinly that it might as well be a social grant rather than an educational input. Excellent people, local and foreign, are excluded from the system. Most skills training is done without a practical component, as all industry is alienated from participating. And the new generation of lecturers and trainers often have no practical experience themselves. The ANC will never be able to fix this system. There are too many vested interests. The so-called New Dawn is presided over by the very man who has failed to get skills education moving in the first place. All we can see on the horizon are more summits, plans, conferences, indabas, and plans. The ANC is trapped by its own approach to this pot of funding. It sees it as a honeypot, which must be used to keep its members and its acolytes happy. You can't run a training system like this. What we need is a total change in skills education. We can offer it, the ANC can't. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is the Honourable Ndlozi.
Thank you, Chairperson. This debate is based on a false assumption that the reason we have unemployment or high unemployment, particularly for black youth, is due to the lack of skills. This means we would have jobs, possibly in tertiary skills level, and nobody would be occupying them. Over the past 24 years, we have lost close to 612,000 jobs in the mining industry, and almost an equal number has been lost in agriculture. Yet, according to the quarterly labor force survey for the fourth quarter of 2017, matric unemployment, matric graduate rate unemployment stands at 27.5%. Meaning, you told people to go to school and they will get jobs. They have gone to school, yet there are no jobs. Today, Honorable Ramaphosa launched what he calls the Youth Employment Service, which is basically an extension of EPWP to the private sector. It does not create sustainable jobs. It simply continues the precarious labor contract that characterizes EPWPs in government and basically avails these young people as cheap laborers. The reason we do not have jobs is because the private sector, which you rely on to create jobs, has failed over the last 24 years to do so, regardless of the fact that you have not touched corporate tax in over decades. So, we do not need a new approach to skills development. We need a new approach to developmental planning. Stop blaming people for the incompetence of the South African capitalists. Stop telling people you don't have jobs because you are unskilled. People have gone to school. They are waiting for you to create jobs. You are waiting for the market to create jobs. It is the capitalists of South Africa that have failed to create jobs, and they are the ones that must be told that they have failed as the leaders over the past 24 years in the markets to give jobs. We need a developmental strategy that creates sustainable jobs, not those part-time cheap labor jobs of Honorable Ramaphosa. We need our own banks that will invest in black young entrepreneurs. Create banks that believe in black talent, that will give black entrepreneurs money to go out there and create jobs. The reason we don't have jobs is because the people with money and investments don't believe in black talent. They are not funding our black people who've got ideas to create jobs. We must revive our manufacturing sector by ensuring protection of infant industries. We must have the local is lekker industrial revolution. We must produce local TVs, or our own TVs, our own cell phones, our own irons, microwaves, and all the electronics. In line with the Industrial Revolution, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we have a chance to invent a new DTT TV, which does not need a set-top box to translate a signal and broadcast. Where does that opportunity lie? You need a bank that believes in the majority of the people in this country and gives them money to create jobs, not more skills. There are many skills. Most of the countries that have developed and have got jobs, they've got jobs not because the majority of the people who produce the things we consume in the economy are not tertiary skilled people. There are people with matric. Some of them don't even have matric. Majority of our matriculants or matric graduates are sitting at home. They don't have jobs. They are skilled. Who is failing to give them jobs is the markets that you keep relying on to give you
Honourable
jobs.
Member, your time is now
Take the
expired.
responsibility of creating jobs by creating a state bank that will redirect investments and start believing in black talent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Ngwezi.
Honorable House Chairperson, a renewed approach to skills development begins with the old injunction of getting the basics right, as these are foundational to ensuring not only our future economic growth, but also employment opportunities for all. And getting the basics right begins with early childhood development, which is currently in crisis, and was placed under the mandate of the incorrect department, as well as poor leadership of its former Minister, Tabile Dlamini. House Chairperson, early childhood development must be removed from the Department of Social Development to basic education so that there can be correct alignment in respect of policy and childhood development. This will be a good place to start in terms of getting basics right. Chairperson, South Africa not only remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, but its inequality continues to widen. The only way to narrow this gap sustainably is through the provision of quality basic education. We have 26,000 schools in South Africa, and our learners at these schools have an entrenched constitutional right to education. This right is immediately claimable and not subject to progressive realization. Why then are we seeing our grade 4 learners being classed as among the worst readers lacking basic skills? Why are our children learning in languages that they have never heard before their first day at school? Honorable Chairperson, youth unemployment remains critically high and is a recipe for disaster. Alignment between the market skills demand and skills requirement and what is being taught at schools or training institutions is still largely mismatched, and this must be corrected, failing which our current future economic growth will be stifled and handicapped. Of critical importance, though, remains to get the basic right, and the IFP hopes to see a concerted effort by the government in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, your time has expired. Can you leave the podium, please? The next speaker is the Honourable Kubisa.
Chairperson, honourable members, thank you very much. South Africa's skills shortage must be viewed in its historical context too. Mwelezi and Nobantu Mbeki, in their book entitled A Manifesto of Social Change, How to Save South Africa, maintain that, I quote, two things are therefore important to understand about the formation of South Africa. The fact is that for the last 150 years, the indigenous population was effectively prohibited from acquiring Western technical and managerial skills, which might have replaced the traditional technical skills they had lost. And they were denied the ability to acquire modern business and industrial assets. The second is that the population brought from Europe by the Dutch East India Company in the 17th and the 18th centuries became increasingly isolated from modern Europe, and therefore did not have the skills that the European population developed during the two critical centuries. And this, which culminated in the Industrial Revolution. Most manual labor was done by slaves, which further contributed to the loss of skills among whites, unquote. It is therefore patently clear that we need a renewed skills approach to our skills development, an approach that will afford the South African populace those much needed vocational, technical, managerial leadership and entrepreneurial skills to help compete effectively in the job market and also allow them to create their own jobs. Now, the subject for discussion at hand is very critical and crucial. It is a subject that requires constant ventilation with an aim of assessing whether, as a democratic state, we are sincerely responding to the skills development of the people of South Africa generally and the workforce in various environments. We need to ask ourselves as to whether our schools and work-related environments provide ample opportunities for skills development and economic activity. I submit, Honorable Chairperson, that this subject begs the question about whether we are certain as to where skills training should begin. The Skills Development Act, as amended, maintains that the aim of skills development is to encourage workers to participate in learning environments to improve the employment prospects of persons previously disadvantaged by unfair discrimination and to redress those disadvantaged through training and education, to provide and regulate employment services, etc. From our side as the National Freedom Party, we want to argue that skills development starts with laying the good foundation at the early phases of the education of our learners. Learners' competencies for reading, writing, and mathematics literacy must be developed. Learners must be afforded the best technological education in the lower grades of their education career. Learners' cognitive skills and intellectual dexterity must be developed and enhanced. Our learners must be taught research skills. They must be taught to argue and think critically, laterally, and independently. Obviously, the whole question of skills development at its fundamental level implores us to ask ourselves, assist our children in creative thinking. The
Honourable
subject.
Member, your time has now expired.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Wolmerans. Is the member delivering his maiden speech?
Honorable Chair, honorable members, it's common cause that the normative scheme of South African education sector alongside its transmutations will assume a developmental character envisaged in the National Development Plan. We have so far reviewed a wide-ranging literature on education in its broader sense, and to this effect, we should insist that the NDP must be our flag bearer as we try to practically interlink the role of SETAs, Tvets, colleges, and universities in producing the skills set commensurate with our modernized economy. We must therefore encode the NDP in our collaborative efforts as social partners, the education community, and the private sector. To this end, we have an opportunity to see the glass half full or half empty. Honorable members, the sharp emphasis on technical and vocational education and training and SETAs that our government has engineered dates back as far back as 2003, when the then Minister of Education, the late Kada Asmal, may his soul rest in peace, reminded the nation that 2003 has been declared the year of FET colleges. He went further to say, I quote, "This initiative has positioned the sector for effective delivery of skills needs and placed them on the cutting edge for skills development in the country. The recorded increase in student intake, the development of new programs, and increased participation in learnerships bear testimony to the potential for growth and future development in this sector. The commitment of business, community, and other government departments in making this sector a vibrant one has assisted in strengthening the recognition of sector in developing mid-level skills that the economy requires. In 2009, the South African government prioritized skills planning through government priority outcome 5.1.1, and it said is to establish a credible institutional mechanism for skills planning. The white paper for post-school education and training plays the role of technical and vocational education and training as an integral component towards skills development in our country. This document states that both the Tvet and community colleges must be flexible, responsive to employer and community needs, and cater for an expanding number of youth and adult learners, many from the least privileged sections of our society. This has also been emphasized in the National Development Plan, which looks at the goal of post-school system, which should ultimately provide quality learning opportunities to young people, adults who want to change career or upgrade skills, people who have left school before completing their secondary education, and unemployed people who wish to start a career. On the other hand, the Human Resource Development Council of South Africa has on its strategic goals as skills for the transformed society and economy using workplace as a platform. This goal aims at seeing the country producing appropriately skilled as well as transformed society and the economy. We must therefore support the HRDC with its continued responsibility to monitor the implementation and realization of this goal by all the implementing agents as well as the departments. And as far as the Tvet colleges are concerned, the African National Congress-led government is the first to acknowledge that the Tvet colleges have been characterized in the following manner. There have been backlog in issuing of national certificates for vocational certification, the location of the Tvets in as far as the provinces are concerned, decentralized. There has been quite some mismanagement which borders on corruption. We have not made well in as far as promoting Tvets as a first choice of higher learning, broadening access to post-school for young people located in rural areas. As of October 2017, the Department of Higher Education had reported that the entire backlog in the process of applications for the national and diploma and national certificate vocational certificates for Tvet colleges has been eliminated. The administration of Tvet colleges has for now been centralized to ensure that the work of these colleges is streamlined and operate more efficiently. Any forms or traces of corruption in these institutions should be rooted out decisively by the department. Programs such as the Decade of the Artisan 2014 to 2024 enhance the position of Tvet colleges as a first port of call amongst the youth and will ensure that the Tvet colleges will become the cornerstone of the country's acute skills shortage. We encourage the Department of Higher Education and Training to facilitate programs that will ensure the access to Tvet colleges in rural areas is strengthened. Following the successful launch of the Adopt a Tvet College campaign last year, the HRDC continued to promote and increase partnership and cooperation between industry and Tvet colleges. This has been demonstrated by the partnership between Sasol and the Flavius Mareka Tvet College in the Free State, where the employers from Sasol offer lectures to students at the college. Ford is another example that has donated prototype vehicles to the Ekurhuleni West Tvet College for their workshop practicals. Successful partnerships were formed between additional companies and Tvet colleges. We would like to see even more focused partnerships developed between business and institutions of higher education so as to secure a better fit between the professional qualifications and what the country needs in our economy. A joint effort between government, labor, business, and civil society is therefore critical. In line with the HRDC's partnership approach to skill development, the Council approached various companies to encourage them to establish partnerships with higher education institutes. Other institutions in the private sector, such as General Electric, South Africa Synthetic Oil Limited, Sasol, Mutusi Knowledge Center, Standard Bank, and Young Managers Foundation, have committed and are already on board, and this is a step in the right direction for the growth of our economy. On our comparative analysis within the BRICS partnerships, vocational and technical education programs in India have gained much greater attention in the past few years and have been included in the main policy agenda of government, just like we have done in the NDP. With corresponding increase in fiscal funding, India's vocational and technical education programs are aimed at creating employment opportunities and imparting suitable skills for self-employment, particularly in the rural and unorganized sectors. The government of India has set itself targets up to 2022. In the NDP, we have set ourselves the same targets up to 2030. Some of the challenges, though, facing the Indian Tvet system include lack of employment of graduates, where the World Bank is stating that more than 60% of all graduates remained unemployed even after 3 years of completion of their course. The report also found that public training institutes were not able to fulfill their role in producing skills for the informal sector. Other challenges in the system include quality and financing of the system, an ineffective funding model, a strong mismatch between demand and supply side factors, and lack of match between labor market needs and vocational courses. In response, the government is currently taking initiatives aimed at encouraging private partnership, mainly aimed at making the system more responsive to the need of the labor market. That is the Indian government. If you look at it, it is a replica of what we need to do. Upgrading of training institutions into centers of excellence through the World Bank has assisted in other countries. It is a page that we need to take out of their book. So says the NDP as well. A partnership and collective responsibility between stakeholders, government, business organizations, cooperatives, trade unions, constituency bodies, trade and professional bodies is critical to achieving our aspirations of higher education, of higher economic growth and development, higher productivity and skilled and capable workforce to support a skills revolution in South Africa. We need to find innovative ways of working together to improve efficiency, quality, and the impact of education, skills development, and training in our country. The ANC will continue working with both the private and public sector to enlist graduates. Work placement opportunities have progressively succeeded in the recent past in both sectors, where our graduates in training have been permanently absorbed, and entities such as Transnet, PRASA, Xaro, BP Billiton, and many others. We are, however, aware of some graduate programs that are structured adequately to transfer skills. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Honorable Fultani.
The self-serving ANC government is still stuck with the old tender system, which hardly produces any sustainable jobs. The psychological consequence thereof is that kids see very little value in being educated just for part-time jobs. It doesn't make sense to be stuck in school when you've got no hope of getting a job. The high dropout rate in our schooling system, for a variety of reasons, results in far less people getting skilled, getting educated so that they can understand and appreciate the skilling process. That has got to be preceded by education. Male teachers befriending school girls instead of teaching them is one big contributor to the lack of skills, because kids get out of school as parents instead of getting out of school as graduates because of male teachers. Now, the dominant institution in that environment is the Association of Teachers. You know the name. And what is our ANC government doing about it? They list them as voters so that they can continue to perpetuate this social evil. From about 1 million entrants into our education system, only 50% thereof graduate even to go to tertiary. The other consequence of this situation in our country is that there is ongoing misalignment of our curricula with industry needs. The result of that is that we have got inappropriate education and very few get appropriate schools, and as such, unemployment stays high. On the job skilling benefits, only 28% of the workforce. That's what the statistics tell us. Employers are not impressed by the limited benefits that come with skilling their employees. That factor is as a result of lack of cooperation between government and the private sector. Lack of infrastructure. Kids die very frequently having gone to school, but they find that the toilets are not appropriate. Even the grounds around the toilets in some cases are such that kids just sink there. So we're burying kids that die having gone to school. Roads are not usable. Protests result in deaths. Only last week, someone in Ciskei in the Eastern Cape was shot. A 61-year-old taxi driver who joined a protest was shot by police under your management. Then there is pathetic public works.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
Which provides no appropriate infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Alberts.
Thank you, Chairperson. South Africa is politically and economically at a crossroads where the one road leads to a growing economy and social cohesion and the other to despair and implosion. The ANC has for 23 years implemented a redistributive economic plan that is ultimately unsustainable. We are facing a fiscal cliff while the looting continues unabatedly. Looting continua, that is ultimately the ANC's mantra. Die enigste weg uit hierdie krisis is om ekonomiese groei eerste te stel. Die voorvereiste daarvoor is uitmuntende basiese en hoër onderwys. Dit is bewys deur talle state met stygende inkomstevlakke soos Suid-Korea, Taiwan en Australië. Trouwens, Australië bestuur sy ekonomie baie beter as wat hulle tans cricket speel. Die omgekeerde is natuurlik ook waar. Indien ons ekonomie net deels bestuur was soos die Proteas tans cricket speel, sou die debat nie nodig gewees het nie. Ongelukkig is die ANC se antwoord op die krisis om meer van dieselfde ekonomiese kwaksalwerry toe te pas. Herverdeling totdat daar later net armoede oor is om te verdeel. Witness the equality in Zimbabwe. Everybody is equally hungry while the governing elite is living in royalty. That is our future if we do not change our economic mindset from redistribution and expropriation to growth and abundance. So far, the ANC's attitude is one of what could go wrong. Well, the short answer is the following. The expropriation of the hope for citizens to live a better life, the expropriation of hope for social cohesion, and the expropriation of the peace brokered in 1994. Ons het wel 'n kans om die Zimbabwe scenario te vermy. Ons sal, soos ek voorheen gesê het, wêreldgehalte onderwys daar moet stel vir ons jong mense. Ons moet ons mense aanstel op meriete en nie op ras nie. En ons moet ons met meriete staal vir die 4de en 5de industriële revolusies. Want ek moet julle waarsku, die robotte is hier en hulle word al hoe slimmer en al hoe selfbewus en al hoe mensliker. Hulle gaan ons vervang en as ons nie strategies korrek optree nie, gaan ons ekonomies agteruit gaan en net meer werkloosheid hê. Ons het dus alle rede om eintlik saam te staan en kollektief die korrekte ekonomiese pad te volg. Een van vrye markgroei, goeie opleiding, meriete met die volhoubare vermoë om die arme mense ook op te hef, want dit is natuurlik belangrik. So this is a clarion call for the ANC to wake up from its socialist dream. If you do not and drag us deeper into the communist despair, the consequences will be dismal for all of us. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable Madisha.
The 1994 RDP white paper acknowledged the interdependence of objectives of reconstruction and development on the one hand and growth on the other. It clearly stated that if we were to effectively address the problems of unemployment, poverty, gross inequality, our economy had to be firmly placed on a path of high and sustainable growth, and the need to develop our human resources with a focus on skills development and acquisition through our education system and workplaces was firmly elucidated in the RDP. Chair, subsequent to the RDP, government launched GEAR as GISA later, which both showed the shortage of skills, unemployment, absence of quality education, and infrastructure. But in the Zuma era, we were subjected to the new growth path and its vision to place jobs and decent work at the center of economic policy. Remember the target of 5 million new jobs by 2020, but the country today faces 40% of unemployment. I know ANC perpetually rejects that. It is 40%. Improvements in education and skills levels were again highlighted as fundamental prerequisite for achieving the goal of this new growth path. And somewhere in between the new growth, IPAP, and the 9-point plan came the IDP. In the past decade, under the ANC, unemployment, poverty, inequality, and increased, and our educational outcomes actually increased. We have this kind of problems. The fact is that one of the main drivers of the structural poverty and inequality is the relationship between education levels and income. Our education sector has suffered from poor management, continual changes in policy and curricula, the policy experimentation, and gross political interference by ANC. Under ANC, our education system has failed our youth and our nation, despite generous budgetary provisions. The free higher education announcement...
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
The ANC has failed. The ANC has failed.
Your time has expired, Honourable Member.
Dear South African.
The next speaker is Honourable Jefter.
Honourable Chair, the National Development Plan must be our starting point in this debate. The following passage from the NDP suffices. I quote, "The different parts of the education system should work together, allowing learners to take different pathways that offer high-quality learning opportunities. And there should be clear linkages between schools, FET colleges, universities of technology, universities, and other providers of education and training." It further states that there should also be clear linkages between education and training and the world of work, close quote. Honorable Chair, the most important task at our hands is to incentivize the private sector. In exchange, highly skilled practitioners in incorporate must mentor university graduates once they serve their internship. We can move South Africa forward through a concerted effort between labor, private sector, and government. We pin our hopes on the upcoming Jobs Summit. We have no doubt that our developmental goals will tie us together to a common vision. Honorable Chair, the project of skills development implicates the SETAs, government, the private sector, and the universities. It is almost implicit that the project of skills development requires a joint effort between these stakeholders. The SETAs have to be fashionable. They should attract the most agile and performing students. Honorable Chair, our economy is subdued. We have a large social expenditure in the world. We must insulate our democracy and economic growth through upskilling young people. We have young people who don't complete their primary and secondary education. Skills revolution on its own won't work. We have to subject our youth, our young people to conscription after matriculating. Once they have been trained in discipline, it is much easier to have them held accountable. Honorable Chair, the urgent need to upskill young graduates must entail a renewed approach. We argue that graduates as early as second year should be rotated across various public and
Honourable
private
Member, your time has now expired.
to gain work exposure. I thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honourable Botha, who will also be delivering his maiden speech.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. The political ethos, mantra, and creed of realizing education as a commodity of necessity is firmly dedicated to the young Matthias of the people's struggle, and in particular House Chairperson, in remembrance that in 10 days' time, on the 6th of April, we will be commemorating the 39th anniversary of the execution of the young man called Comrade Solomon Kalushi Maslangu. Comrade Solomon Maslangu has been instructive that our youth should continue to reap the fruits of the tree which his death has borne. The history of South Africa is one besieged with the most acute social fault lines of having the twin dangers of unemployment and poverty which coexist. We remind our students and our young people that during his State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa indicated, and I quote, "Our most grave and most pressing challenge is youth unemployment," unquote. Fortunately for these young people, South Africa is a giant social laboratory which has produced multifaceted of successes through the ANC, the People's Movement. The current conjuncture and acumen of our societal leadership, properly represented by President Cyril Ramaphosa, has imbued a conviction in all our young people that the interest and the grievance is of paramount and a necessary consequence to our government. The question of free education has correctly directed a twin impulse of legitimate societal leadership and an active citizenry which feeds our nation. House Chairperson, the question of free education has its roots in a shared prosperity and social justice. The decisive political decision by our President to immediately implement the free higher education for the poor student is part of a historical thesis of transforming and tilting the apartheid state colossus and orientated towards a more humane and just people's project. The singular objective to avail more than 57 billion rand direct money for our free higher education is central to the task of abolishing a major source of social conflict, which is youth unemployment. House Chairperson, a caring government such as the one led by President Ramaphosa would ordinarily use redistributed mechanism of the fiscus to provide a safety net for the poor, and his commitment to our needy students is hugely and commonly known. We have been firmly committed that all needy students of the more than 975,000 enrolled in university since last year will be funded comprehensively. The optimistic expectation of our people has further necessitated that NSFAS equally so get adequate money to ensure that those families who fall outside of the 350,000 income bracket per year, their children also access equitable education. NSFAS will therefore continue to fund almost 300,000 students, with more than 195 of those returning students and just under 100,000 first-time students. An important incubator of knowledge and skills acquisition is the Tvet College education, which encompasses over 290,000 students, which equally so will be funded by this people's caring government. Radical socio-economic change requires, therefore, an adequate social agency led by a conscious and, more importantly, a pro-poor student steward, as opposed by our President. House Chairperson, we claim no lies, and neither do we claim easy victories. As a testament to people's power, a total of 985,000 students were enrolled in public higher education institutions in 2015. This student enrollment, Honorable Chairperson, increased between 2009 and 2015 by 147,000 students. Properly put, it is the antithesis to freedom, the grave concern about youth unemployment. It cannot be correct, House Chairperson, that 3.1 million young people is outside of employment of educational institutions. The decisive intervention, therefore, by President Ramaphosa today to launch the 1 million Youth Employment Service Program, the YES program, will complement, Honorable House Chair, the existing initiatives of the National Youth Service Program, the Youth Employment Accord, and more importantly, the Youth Wage Subsidy, which lower the cost of employment of our young people. Honorable Chairperson, the more young people graduate, the more it will have a multiplier effect to make poverty poorer. The question that we are posing today in honor of Solomon Mahlangu is to the direct descendants of Hendrik Verwoerd, when he indicated in 1953, Honorable House Chairperson, what is the use to teach an African child mathematics? That is the question that he has posed. Our response as a people's government say that we have increased the number of graduates in science, engineering, and technology in excess of 58,000. In a direct response to Hendrik Verwoerd, we have chartered accountants today, who is 14,000 of them in South Africa, which happens to be black and African. That is our response to the question, Honorable Chairperson, of white superiority that used to live in South Africa. More importantly, Honorable Chairperson, there is a question about the necessary research capability of the South African state. Firstly, let me report today that the number of research master's graduates has increased by 20.4% to 7,317 graduates in 2015. In the same breath, Honorable House Chairperson, our Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, one Honorable Buti Manamela, just last night have added value to being a research master's graduate. Of course, House Chairperson, we will fail to do justice to our people, and in particular those that are located in the Northern Cape and in Mpumalanga, if we don't report to them today the expansion of the university system in terms of the establishment of the Soplaiki University in Kimberley and the establishment of the University of Mpumalanga in Bombela, which honorable members today have been able to enroll in Kimberley at Soplaiki University, 703 students and 1,261 students at the University of Mpumalanga. On top of that, Honorable Chairperson, we must appreciate the commitment from our government that additional 2.9 billion rand has been made available over the medium-term expenditure framework to phase in the development and the expansion of those institutions. That, Honorable House Chairperson, is telling the truth and not claiming any easy victories. I would fail to correct a statistics that has been put earlier on the basis, Honorable Chairperson, that the central statistics in South Africa, that's SA, have a statistic that says the value of higher education, how it contributes to unemployment. Accordingly, therefore, Honorable House Chairperson, let me quote, according to Stats SA data, for the second quarter of 2017, only 7.4% of graduates were unemployed. This is in contrast to the figure of 27.9% of persons living in South Africa with only a matric qualification. It therefore holds, House Chairperson, that the more you get qualified, the more you will become employed and the less you will be part of the unemployment masses. Honorable House Chairperson, Emil Cabral has been instructive that the biggest struggle is against our own weaknesses. It cannot be correct that in Parliament the biggest struggle is a struggle against a weakness about forgetting. The fact of the matter is, Honorable House Chairperson, that in terms of the global competitive ranking of South Africa, as commissioned by the World Economic Forum, primary school enrollment stands at 97%. Secondary school enrollment stands at 94%. 81,000 new jobs has been created between September 2017 and December 2017. That, Honorable House Chairperson, is what the African National Congress stands for. We stand for more jobs, we stand for restoration of values, we stand for a revival of consciousness, we stand for a resilience of a pro-poor people's agenda. And I present, Honorable House Chairperson, the face of this new dawn to the members in the House. And this is the man, our President, that will lead and continue to lead a resilience of a pro-poor people's agenda. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Bukwa.
Chairperson, tackling skill mismanagement and skill shortages is a major challenge for the labour market and training policies in the context of rapid and substantial changes in skill needs. It is common cause that a substantial number of employers complain that they cannot find employees which have the skills that their business requires. At the same time, many graduates face difficulties in finding job opportunities matching their qualification. Educational attainment has increased substantially over the years. However, a large share of individuals still leave the education system without completing their matric. The labour market is characterized persistently by high rates of unemployment, low participation rates, and these affect mainly the youth of South Africa, low-skilled individuals, and individuals who come from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. Our country, Chairperson, needs to invest in the right skills, not simply merely adding on more skills that are inefficient. In order for us to strengthen the economy that we speak of today, the Sexual Education and Training Authorities is one of the strategic interventions that have been put in place to ensure that we have quality training and education. 80% of the skills levies are awarded to SETAs, and while the remaining 20% of those levies is given to the National Skills Fund. SETAs are usually inefficient producers of skills. Notably, outsourcing of training has reduced industry ownership. Skills which are taught are not what is relevant in the industry. There's low quality of training. Of the over 93,000 individuals who are unemployed and part of SETAs and are registered for these programs, only half of them went on to pass and become certified. Only 49,700 individuals who were unemployed and certified. The target, which was set, by the way, was 66,000, meaning that over 43,000 individuals were left without any qualification from the learnership or skills program. There are various issues with the planning, management, and governance of the distribution of funds of these SETAs. And by the way, Chairperson, the NSF as well appears to have become a cash cow for the minister's shortfalls elsewhere. More training opportunities are needed for the employed and unemployed, and this training should be relevant in improving the employability and career progress of participants. Furthermore, governance aspects need to be addressed, such as a lack of coordination, cooperation between the relevant stakeholders, these being the Department of Higher Education, training institution, and employers. This is to ensure that we avoid any hindrance to the development of skills. The implementation of policies is often impeded by a lack of clear goals, a missing or underdeveloped monitoring and evaluation framework, and the instability of policy development. The DA sees the Tvet sector, in particular, as an integral future partner in creating a highly skilled workforce, yet allocating funds into this sector without a serious revamp is problematic for providing the type of skills that are required. The DA believes, Chairperson, that underperforming SETAs should be closed and the funds redirected to the Tvet sector. Only functional and well-performing SETAs should be retained and their boards must be redesigned and corruption will be rooted out. The mandatory grant that companies are given should be increased to support and build the skills that we require. SETAs should be assessed on their level of performance, their knowledge of learning and the skills that are needed, the representation of the sector, the level of communication with that sector, the effectiveness of the delivery of services and training, the availability and capacity of training, and their commitment to fulfilling the needs that the country requires. Honourable Chairperson, South Africans deserve access to skills development and the quality of training that is provided to them should be to the best level. Access to skills training and education opportunities will ensure that South Africans are employed and they can improve the standards of living of their lives. Becoming a more skilled individual and finding employment creates a sense of dignity and purpose. It ensures that young South Africans can be more independent and fulfill their goals, that they can be able to contribute to their families, that they can be able to contribute to the economy and ultimately to the communities that they come from. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable September.
Thank you again, House Chair. Honourable members, let's say we've heard a lot of inputs here today, and I think it's important to say that there are in many instances where we've heard what the members have said. There are very many important points you have put forward also, and we think that those points can help us to take the debate forward, and the ultimate goal that we would want to reach is important. As the ANC and in our program, we will continue to make sure that we address the technical and vocational education and training, and in particular the information systems, the management systems, and so on. But for all the successes, honourable members, that we have, I want today to pay homage to a very outstanding public servant that we've had in the form of Feroz Patel. Feroz was the DDG of the Tvet colleges. Feroz Patel passed on last week, and we are very, very sad that indeed such a well and capable person are lost in the system, that the family do not have him. We don't have him to come to Parliament anymore. But we must say thank you very much for the contribution that he has made as it relates to the Tvet colleges and the power that he took to make sure that he addressed all the different issues that we have raised insofar as the colleges is concerned. We will miss you, Feroz, and may your soul indeed rest in peace. Your work will never be forgotten. Honourable members, it's important to say that we must continue to address the bond that we have between the universities and the colleges and the SETAs. We cannot separate them and think that what we can do is to give young people the kind of assistance that they require. They require assistance in the labour market. They require advice. And we think that this is what we can input into the entire discourse to make sure that we can address an increase in the post-school institutions. And we must do so by ensuring that this advice that they require can be and should be in each and every institutions in the form of support centres. But more important, the department have addressed programs to address the skills deficit that many are talking about, and has started programs such as the New Generation of Academics programs. And this program, indeed, honourable members, empowers young graduates that you have spoken about in obtaining their postgraduate qualifications and indeed their master's qualifications, and therefore become academics. I'm sure Honourable Ndlozi was a beneficiary of this great program also, and has got his doctorate through this. But we think, Honourable Ndlozi, I was addressing you, we think that the points that he has made certainly is very useful, and I think it's points that we can take into consideration, but To address the issue that he has spoken about, we've got already, Honourable Ndlozi, the DTI job fund that gives refunds when there are job programs. Already they have what is called the 40% that they give incentives, and in particular to the black industrialists. And at the level both of the IDC and the DTI, there are a range of different funded projects. It's interesting you raised the issue of the bank, but there are these DTI and IDC funded projects that we do have, and they are focusing on manufacturing. They are focusing on iron and steel, and they are focusing also on a range of other manufacturing, both in the finance, project management, a range of those kind of things. And we think it's important. I support the honourable member that said, indeed, honourable, the member from the ANC, indeed the president has walked the talk today by launching the program. I want to say, honourable members, it's been very interesting. On the one side, we hear in the DA, close the Tvets and scrap the CETAs. On the other side, we hear strengthen the CETAs and make sure. Which one is it, honourable members of the DA? Which camp is it that is speaking? Because at the beginning it says close, at the end speaker says we should open that. But then, of course, we've heard all these contradictions for a long time. On the one side, they say we don't support land reform, and then the other side, they say we will give you what is called title deeds. Of course, this continuation will continue, and I'm sure we cannot take into consideration
Honourable
any
member,
of the issues
your time
that
is
they
now
have raised.
expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable members, that concludes the debate on this subject. We now come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a motion without notice? The ANC? Honourable Killian?
No, Chair.
I'm dealing now with motions without notice. Will the whips assist, please?
Motion without notice.
Yes.
Chairperson, I would like to read the following. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the death of the renowned physicist and professor at the University of Cambridge, Stephen Hawking, on Wednesday, 14 March 2018, at the age of 76. Further notes that Hawking suffered from ALS, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, for decades. This disease is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, or it is a type of a slow progressive form of motor neuron disease. We remember that his early encounter with the disease was depicted in the film The Theory of Everything in 2014. We further remember that he made several discoveries in the field of physics, mathematics, and cosmology that raised his profile internationally. We acknowledge that Hawking's theories unlocked a universe of possibilities that we and the world are exploring. We remember with fondness his comments to astronauts in space station in 2014, which was to keep flying like Superman. Further, this House offers and shares its condolences with his family, his friends, and fellow physicists, and we acknowledge that he truly was a Superman in his own right. I thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA?
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House, 1, notes with appreciation that the municipality of Kanaland, one of the poorest and the smallest municipalities in the Western Cape, has managed to repay every cent of a 12 million rand debt to Eskom. Notes that the debt was the result of poor governance and serious mismanagement by the previous Kanaland government, which almost led to the electricity supply to the area being cut. Further notes that Kanaland is a largely agricultural area where most of the inhabitants are farm or seasonal farm workers. Appreciates that the achievement is especially remarkable in the light of the fact that the lower bound poverty line has been set at 443 Rand by Statistics South Africa, and that about 10.4% of Kanaland households have an income of less than 400 Rand per month, resulting in an increase in indigent dependency on municipal support. Acknowledges that this means that the resources of the Kanaland municipality is severely strained in their efforts to provide free basic services to the people of Kanaland. Appreciates that where the DA governs, the lives of people improve. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
Chair, the ANC object on the basis of paragraph 2 and
The
6.
motion is not agreed to. The EFF?
I hereby rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters that the House note the overcrowding at Tembisa Hospital in Gauteng. Note that of particular concern is the isolation room for TB patients, which, because of overcrowding, has made it a less of a place of recovery and more of a place of infection, as nurses themselves are afraid to enter for fear that they may contract TB. Acknowledge that the waiting time is so long at the hospital that a pregnant woman had to wait 7 days sitting in a chair before she could be attended to and have a C-section administered. And patients sleep on the hospital floor during their stay. Further, acknowledge that these examples are just a fraction of the problems at Tembisa Hospital, with general state of the hospital making it a near impossibility for a patient to get better. These are not just the complaints of patients, but also that of the staff. That is why, on the 28th of February 2018, Tembisa community, in association with Tembisa Hospital employees, handed over a memorandum to hospital management. Further, recognize that this is yet another example of a collapsed public health care system and requires immediate attention. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
We object inaccurate information.
There is an objection and the motion is not agreed to. The ANC?
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House congratulates Moni Mokel on his achievement of becoming the 5th Standard Bank Protea to reach the milestone of 300 test match wickets. Notes that Mokel was unstoppable for the Proteas in Australia's second innings, helping Proteas to triumph over Oasis in Newlands on Sunday, 25th March 2018. Remembers that they follows in the footsteps of Sean Pollock on 421 wickets, Dale Steyn currently 419, Makayantini 390, and Alan Donald 330. Understands that Mokel has been one of the stalwarts of the world-class peace attack for more than a decade and played a major role in some of the Proteas' outstanding performance in recent times, including away series wins in England and Australia. Commends him on finishing his career on such a high note against opponents whom he has produced some of his most memorable performance, and congratulates Mon on joining the 300 club. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. The IFP?
Thank you, Chairperson. I hereby move without notice on behalf of the IFP that the House congratulates the Department of Economics at the University of Zululand for hosting a successful inauguration of a financial risk and stability debate and workshop on the 22nd and 23rd of March 2018. Notes that the workshop was aimed at bringing together policymakers, academics, researchers, business analysts, students, and other stakeholders to discuss topics surrounding financial stability, financial risk, and other related topics. Acknowledges that this workshop's ardent necessity is born out of not only a global necessity of the age, but in particular the current political and socio-economic circumstances we find ourselves in as South Africa. Further acknowledges that the challenges we face, although steep, are not insurmountable, and therefore it is incumbent upon academics to not only contribute to the public discourse through papers and workshops such as this, but also in academically equipping our future generations so that they may one day assume leadership roles in the country on the basis of not only intelligence, but also informed governance, and finally wishes that more academic institutions will contribute to the public discourse on a variety of matters and make their inputs available to policymakers like ourselves. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I move without notice on behalf of the National Freedom Party that this House notes with pain and sadness the death of Mrs. Nelisiwe Mngomezulu, who was pregnant, and her children, Stelukolo, Olwetu, and Asimbonge. This House notes that these members of one family were tragically struck by the lightning last week. Further notes that all the deceased will be laid to rest this coming Thursday. Hereby calls upon the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, nationally and provincially, and the South African Weather Services to intensify efforts that can help alert members of the public about climatic change, rainfall, floods, and other disasters in order to save further loss of lives. This House conveys its heartfelt condolences to the Mngomezulu family, relatives, neighbors, friends, and all citizens of Ngwavuma for a traumatic experience and tragic loss of lives. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress that the House notes that the school kids kidnapped by Boko Haram jihadist group in Dapchi, northeastern Nigeria, were reunited with their families on Sunday, the 26th March 2018, after spending nearly five weeks in captivity. Further notes that the 105 girls covered head to toe in Bukas arrived aboard 5 buses in the town of Dapchi in Yobe State, where they met their parents at the boarding school where they were snatched on February 19, 2018. Acknowledges that the girls were among the 111 who were seized, of whom 5 died apparently during the violent hostage-taking or in the trucks that took them away. Recalls that after their release on Wednesday, they spent 3 days in the national capital, Abuja, where they met President Muhammadu Buhari. Understands that their release left one school girl, Leah Sharibu, still in the hands of the kidnappers, reportedly because she is a Christian who refused to be converted to Islam. Believes that the Dapchi kidnapping revived painful memories in Nigeria of the April 2014 abduction of over 200 schoolgirls from Chibok, a town also in the northeast, which caused global outrage.
Honourable Member, your time is now expired.
Thank you.
Honourable Members, if there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The UDM.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I move without notice on behalf of the United Democratic Movement that the House notes that on Thursday, the 22nd of March 2018, in a small peri-urban town of Alice Edigeni, Eastern Cape, an elderly woman pensioner, Nobesutu Katase, was brutally murdered whilst arriving home from the bank by an alleged young male drug addict. Acknowledges that the family of the alleged murderer immediately handed himself over to the police soon after he noticed that he had blood on his hands and body, whilst also acting in a questionable manner. Further notes that in the same town of Alice, in 2015, an elderly couple of 70 and 80 years respectively were also brutally murdered, once again allegedly by a group of young drug addicts. Again in 2015, another elderly female domestic worker was murdered whilst at work in similar circumstances. A year ago, in 2017, 3 women were murdered by what was believed to be a serial killer targeting women. In the same year, a female student was shot at point blank whilst in a hostel at the University of Fort Hare, Alice again. In February 2018, 2 women were fatally stabbed by an alleged drunk whilst in a tavern. Believing that crime against women and the elderly is an attack on their fundamental human rights, central to which is their right to life. Further believing that the state has a duty to defend all citizens.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
The elderly. Conveys his condolences.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
I so move.
Honourable Members, if there are no objections, I put the motion. No objection, agreed to. May I remind the Honourable Members that you only have 1.5 minutes to do a motion without notice, and no additional time can be added to that, whether you are finished or not. The Freedom Front Plus, they're not here. The DA?
Thank you, Chairperson. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House, 1, notes the many cases of school violence and abuse of learners by teachers reported in the press and on social media. 2, calls on the Minister of Basic Education to ensure that the South African Council of Educators, or SABC, has the adequate funding to investigate and prosecute teacher misconduct. 3, calls on the provincial education departments to comply with the legal requirement to report cases to SABC and to replicate the Western Cape's Safe Schools call centre for reporting school safety concerns. 4, calls on the Minister of Police to make the necessary training and resources available to protect schools from community crime. 5, calls on the Minister of Social Development to ensure that the Child Protection Register is properly maintained and that school staff can be checked against it. 6, calls on the Minister of Justice to ensure that the Sexual Offenders Register is properly maintained so that the school staff can be checked against it. And 7, would support a minimum essential service level for school staff so that children are not left unsupervised and unsafe during school hours. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no objections, I put the motion.
We object debatable aspects.
There's an objection. The motion is not agreed to. The EFF. The EFF. Order, honourable members. Is there motion without notice? Okay. The ANC.
Chairperson, Chair, I rise on behalf. Okay. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the death of 3 men who were drowned during a baptism ceremony at Monwabisi Beach next to Khayelitsha in Cape Town on Sunday, 25 March 2018. Believes that whilst conducting the baptism, 2 of the church members encountered difficulty in the water and the 3rd person then went in to try and assist, but all 3 were drowned. Recalls that the 2 bodies were recovered by Sunday afternoon and the police unit continued in searching for the 3rd person. Recognizes that the water at Monwabisi Beach generally is very dangerous with undercurrents and riptides. Calls for church leaders to be vigilant when conducting these baptism services and conveys its condolences to the families of the deceased and church members. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Cope. The absent. ACDP. They're not here. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows with great sadness the passing on of former Prime Minister Phan Van Khai of Vietnam on Wednesday, 21st March 2018, recognizes that the late former Prime Minister contributed greatly to the building and development of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Further recognizes that he also played a crucial role in promoting bilateral relations between South Africa and Vietnam. Recalls that during his official visit to South Africa in 2004, former Prime Minister met his counterpart, then President Thabo Mbeki, and the two leaders officially established the South African-Vietnam Intergovernmental Partnership Forum for Economic, Trade, Scientific, Technical, and Cultural Cooperation. Believes that the former Prime Minister has left an indelible footprint which can never be erased, a source of wisdom that benefited South Africans and Vietnam. Lastly, conveys its condolences to the government and people of Vietnam. I so move. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The AIC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I hereby move without notice on behalf of African Independent Congress that this House notes the Alfonso Orange Primary School in Port Elizabeth is mired in controversy over its willful conduct to conduct HIV tests on children without consent from their parents. I recognize that this is the most damning travesty in our country, especially in a country that has dignified the conditions of HIV and AIDS. We're furthermore grieved that this Ketimpilo, the NGO, is very much becoming reckless, irresponsible, and uncaring. Further note that we are appalled that the school in question aided and abetted this criminal injuria, notwithstanding its continued obligations to promote the best interests of our children. Note the violation of human rights and children's rights by this NGO. Furthermore, to note that it was just out of order for the school principal to say this test was conducted outside school premises, believing that the school has a duty to look after our children that have been sent to our school. Further urges an immediate investigation into the breach by Eastern Cape Education Department. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Agang. The ANC.
Thank you. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows that the South African athlete Clarence Munyai shattered the country's 200-meter record in a time of 19.69 seconds at the South African Track and Field Championship in Pretoria on Saturday, 17 March 2018. Acknowledges that the 20-year-old Munyai took a massive 0.15 chunk of the previous World 400-meter record holder Wayne van Niekerk in Jamaica in June 2016. Acknowledges that he slashed almost half a second off his previous best, the South SA junior record of 20.10 he set a year ago at the same tax stadium venue. Acknowledges that his time launched him to a 10th place on the world all-time list, while it also the fastest time in the world since 2015 when Jamaican icon Usain Bolt and American Justin Gatlin clocked 19.55 to win the world title in Beijing. Recalls that Munyai became only the fourth South African to dip below 20 seconds over the half-lap sprint, joining an exclusive club that includes Van Niekerk, Anaso Jobodwana, and Akani Simbini, and congratulates Clarence Munyai on such a wonderful performance, wishing him well in future competitive games. We so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The APC, the PAC, the DA.
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes the continuing scourge of rape in the country. Also notes that Lonwaba Solontisi was recently sentenced for raping 39 victims in the Eastern Cape including several teenagers and an 11-year-old. Further notes that the Gauteng Pitfontein plumber rapist raped 55 people, 40 of them being schoolgirls, and we realize that our country has hundreds of serial rapists who never get caught. Acknowledge that in 2016-17, a total number of 49,660 sexual offences were reported to SABC, but the harsh reality is that many of these atrocious crimes never get reported. Further acknowledges that South Africa has one of the highest sexual violence rates in the world, strongly condemns all crimes of a sexual nature, and urges the Minister of Police to prioritize these atrocious crimes. We convey our sincere condolences to those who have fallen victim to this heinous scourge of rape and sexual violence in South Africa, and pledge our continued support to those brave individuals who must deal with the consequence of these cowardly deeds. I thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. The ANC.
I rise on behalf of the African National Congress without notice that the House notes that with sadness the death of the Ambassador Fezwe Faith Radebe on Tuesday, the 30th March 2018, after battling with cancer. Further notes that at the time of her passing, she was serving the country as the ambassador to Sweden, following her full term of service as an